Hello all, this is Umbra, Lord of the Rees, Master of Autism, and the Scourge of Chicken Tendies. Firstly, I want to thank anyone and everyone who has clicked on this video. Even if you click off right now, I appreciate the time you have given me out of your day. This is my first video. I want to say that I am very inexperienced, so any and all feedback on how to improve is appreciated. Today I will be attempting to understand just what the fuck is going on with Sony. If you've been paying attention on the internet, you will know that Sony has been caught up in several online controversies lately. From the Stellar Blade censorship controversy to the more recent Helldivers 2 PSN controversy, it just seems like Sony just can't help harming themselves. Which just begs the question, what the fuck is going on with Sony? They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation with more education, money, and influence than most of us can ever dream of. Yet here they are, making mistakes that even a layman could avoid. Information is scarce, and without a whistleblower or an insider coming out, we cannot know for sure. However, there are tools we can use to determine the likely explanations with a high probability of accuracy. The purpose is not to engage in wild speculation or rumors, but to take our time using only known elements and evidence to deduce the likely explanations. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but rather give you a framework of thinking to make up your own mind. Part 1. Aams Razer. This part of the video is aimed at people who may not know what Aams Razer is, as well as those who just want a refresher. Aams Razer is the problem-solving principle that recommends searching for explanations constructed with the smallest possible set of elements. Attributed to William of Ockham, a 14th century, that is 1300s, philosopher and theologian, the principle is sometimes paraphrased as the simplest explanation is usually the best one. This principle is used even into the modern day by intelligence organizations and scientists. So, to my Trust the Science bros, I'm trusting around 600 years of it. Part 2. The situation and addressing dismissals. So now that we have the frame of thinking, let's look into the Helldivers 2 situation. The most obvious dilemma we face is why. Let's take a look into the implementation. As we know, the announcement came out of left field, leaving gamers and devs both scrambling. This situation was either planned or unplanned, and this is where we can apply the Razer. We must treat both ideas as equal. Let's take the assumption that it was planned. There are several further questions that then must be answered. First, why is it that the response to it was so confused? We know that companies like Sony have legal departments that are meant to review things for legal compliance and prepare releases and scripts for situations where legal liability can be sticky. And we are dealing with entire countries where the requirement of PSN actually does run afoul of consumer protections. Why was this game allowed to even be sold in those areas where they would inevitably become unplayable? A united and scripted response is how these corporations avoid legal liability, as lawsuits can be expensive even if you win them, and corporate lawyers, my friends, are not cheap. This is especially bad if you are considering that prosecution by governments is at play for violation of consumer protection laws. You can't just outspend the government no matter how big your company is. Why is it that in preparation for this, Arrowhead was not provided with press releases and scripted talking points? I can keep on going. There's a lot of hanging threads here. But I think we can effectively cut away this assumption. Comparatively, the assumption that it was not planned does not beg these further questions. It explains the response by Arrowhead, the responses by the CEO and the community managers specifically, who are in many ways scrambling for details that they have not been provided. This answers our question. Now we just need to determine why this was done without planning. Stellar Blade, PSN price hikes, and a consumer revolt. I don't really have enough time to give the Stellar Blade censorship debacle its due, and frankly, better creators than I, like Kyle as well as other gaming channels, have gone into far better detail. I will link them in the video description. I'm just a dude with a toaster that can kind of play games and some weaponized autism. The quick overview was that the game was promised to be released completely uncensored and shipped uncensored on disc, only to have several alterations censoring it released in the day one patch. Whether you agree it was censorship or it wasn't really isn't important to our current discussion. What matters is that people were so upset about this that they canceled their PS Plus subscriptions. The petition on change.org protesting the censorship, which was part of the mass PS Plus canceling campaign, hit over 75,000 signatures. Assuming even just half of them canceled their PS Plus accounts, that's still around 32,000 cancellations. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. The price hike last year saw the cancellation of some estimates at 70,000 subscriptions. Both of them together possibly eclipsing 100,000 cancellations since this time last year. At roughly $80 annually from those accounts, higher for the higher tiers, that is $8 million of revenue lost year over year. And unlike other products, subscriptions are pure profit. That's a lot of essentially free money to lose. And every year people don't renew increases that loss. This is why many smaller companies will bend over backwards for customers that are frankly don't deserve it. Because to that business, you aren't just worth the $20 purchase today, but the thousands of dollars of potential lifelong business that could be gotten. Long story short, they were already hurting before this hit. This brings us to our current situation. Sony's next earnings call is on May 14th, and they're in the middle of an attempt to acquire Paramount. Any major loss of stock value will cause the deal to fall through, so they must do what they can to keep the stockholders happy, or at least content. They need some good news, some Bob Iger style razzle-dazzle to keep the investors from potentially fleeing. So how do they do this? Get some news that can be spun as good and convince investors to stay on board. Enter Helldivers 2. A mass number of new accounts being created can sound very impressive. As a non-specific example, let me try to do my best corpo executive impression. Okay. Well, we have seen a drop in PSN subscriptions. With the recent increase of PSN accounts created by 500%, we will be seeing recovery soon. Why so desperate? Corpo game of musical chairs. I was originally puzzled by the sheer vitriol and panic apparent in Sony's response to the situation until I considered the following. Sony has more or less monopoly on the anime industry at this point, and that matters because that is Sony of Japan's main bread and butter. Sony of America and Sony of Japan have been in a corporate Game of Thrones with each other for decades, with both sides trying to assert control over the massive organization. However, as of late, Sony of America's revenues have been in industries that are on a downward trend. Hollywood and movies in particular have been posting poor returns. Even the standout hits of the past few years pale in comparison to the blockbusters before the pandemic. Meanwhile, anime in the US is starting to eclipse the revenues of Sony Pictures of America. As you can see by these comparisons, they're almost caught up. Their attempts to purchase Paramount really looks to be an attempt to improve their year-over-year revenue to keep pace with the growth of anime. The balance of power is starting to shift back to Japan, and just when they didn't need it, the Stellar Blade controversy hit. The panic from Sony of California makes sense when you think of there being something more personal at stake, namely, jobs and influence. I hope this has given you, gentlemen, ladies, and potential cryptids watching, food for thought. Information I missed, rebuttals, musings, heck, even memes, go ahead and toss them into the comments. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, as I will be doing video essays like this, game reviews, and possibly other content. Thank you again for your time, and remember, passion is nothing to be ashamed of.